in fact pushing back against the racism and scapegoating. But of course, we don't want any of that. Vance needs to say that a Haitian murdered a kid so that he can make people think Haitians are murderers. After all, it's like J.D. Vance's America's Hitler says. It's in their genes. We need to feed the Nazi lie that this is just how Haitians are, so we might as well purposefully
I'm the only two deaths in this dungeon, by the way.
Getting into car accidents because
I was right. These guys are some real gamers,
right? Anything in service of the idea that immigrants are dirty, diseased, barbaric, backwards, dangerous, evil, criminal people.
Nation of immigrants, by the way.
Lie. In fact, it's
what we say.
As in specifically the claim that immigrants are eating pets has been deployed mercilessly to dehumanize Asian immigrants throughout our history, particularly in the lead up to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. But really, it's a xenophobic trope that could be used against anybody. Do you eat pigs? You know what animal is like dogs? Pigs.
Yeah.
You just happen to have been born in a place that doesn't care. Like, people eat all kinds of animals in all kinds of places. People hunt and eat ducks. But if you're racist, you can make it racist. In fact, J.D. Vance, you down-home Appalachian and Ohio man, you, after World War II, when West Virginians migrated to places like Ohio and Indiana to find a better standard of living and better paying jobs, they were often referred to as snakes, snake eyes, and if it wasn't clear enough for you, snake eaters. All of this is just
very,
xenophobia, and it's just
very
so
clear
lazy
theme
and
emerging
obvious.
in these names.
The monsters are eating your pets and bringing crime and disease. I know I've already mentioned it more than once. I've mentioned it so many times. But Trump is literally out there being like, they're poisoning our blood. They've got bad genes that they're mixing
Not our
with
blood,
ours.
dude.
It's wild that he said
We
that.
need that.
And it's just like, Trump, you know, that's just the kind of stuff he says. It's just so.
He's just a wacky guy.
We're just kind of numb to this stuff.
He's just a wacky, silly guy.
Speaking of stupid Nazis.
A recent piece in National Geographic tells you a lot about demographics in America and about how bewilderingly fast they're changing without any real public debate on the subject. The magazine profiles a small.
Why would we have a debate about
Pennsylvania.
demographics? That sounds like some Nazi shit.
Hazleton's population was 2% Hispanic. Just 16 years later, Hazleton is majority Hispanic. That's a lot of change. People who grew up in Hazleton return to find out they can't communicate with the people who now live there. And that's bewildering for people. That's happening all over the country. No
bewildering, dude.
Ever changed this much, this fast.
You'll notice Tucko looks a bit fresher there. A bit less rugged, a little more on
Hooray.
television, a little less disgraced. I could have shown you a few more recent
We
clips of him
two-chested
talking
that
about
key,
this specific
brother.
town and Haitians specifically, and how
We
he's scared of
two-chested
their
that
witchcraft.
key.
I'm not joking. Here's the quote on
Hell
screen for all you
yeah.
watching the video heads out there. Instead, I'd like to focus on this segment he did in 2018. We have an entire segment of our own about that segment, inceptment, etc. In his, he laments the sharp demographic change in a small Midwestern town due to a sharp rise in immigration. Stop me if you've heard this one before. He questions whether or not human beings can handle quick changes like that, sudden social shifts, learning new languages, etc. He has a very high opinion of human beings, clearly. But the piece was sparked, as he states in it, by a different piece in National Geographic, which highlights that small Pennsylvania town of Hazleton. His segment, curiously, is about basically 5% of the article, in a way that pretends the rest of the article doesn't exist. See, the article is called, "As America Changes, Some Anxious Whites Feel Left Behind." So just the perfect collection of words for him to read and not have a second thought about. It discusses issues the town was going through due to a sharp rise in population and demographic shifts. But a lot of the article was about how people tend to adjust, and actually immigration is good for communities, despite growing pains. A local bartender jokes about learning a new language. It follows a white mayor of a majority black city dealing with white backlash for taking down some racist statues. One subject of of the article and a resident of Hazleton, even acknowledges the irony of how her grandfather dealt with the same kind of racist accusations. See, here in America, we don't discriminate when it comes to discrimination. So when, for example, Italians and the Irish came to the country, they were non-white and we hated them. So it's interesting and perhaps frustrating that she knows that, but doesn't care or recognize.
Is that interesting? Or is that just gross?
It as an actual issue. Of course, she also said, "We have one of us in the White House, Trump, and we are going to make America great again." And when asked who she meant by we, she said, "The we are the Caucasians that built this country."
No way, bro. You're from the Caucasus Mountains, dude? I didn't know you were from the Caucasus.
Our generation. We're going to make our grandfathers proud. We have to. First of all, tragic news for her on who did the building on account of being forced to. But also, our generation is the we that built this country? The woman who said that was 53. Fucking Gen X, man. Anyway, my point is that all this stuff, all the different avenues and angles and analysis and information in that article is not mentioned by Tucker. He just read the headline, "As America changes, some anxious whites feel left behind." And he went on the
and boy, are these whites anxious, folks.
news like, what is there to do about this? Who's even talking about it? What's going on?
What is there to be done?
Can people handle anything ever happening? But the article talks about all of that. He chooses to pretend it's this unknowable issue, this unsolvable problem, unless, of course, you want to deport everybody. It's actually quite eerie how familiar this Hazleton story is. For reasons we'll probably discuss later, in the early 2000s, Hazleton experienced an influx of Latino families arriving from other states. The Latino population...
So I've got timed 9s for Dawnbreaker, Siege, and Grim Batal, but I've only got timed 8s for the rest. I should prioritize further raising my score, because while I still need my best trinket from Grim Batal, and there's a part of me that wants to just slam Grim Batal over and over, I do think that this week is turning out to be somewhat easier than I expected. Tyrannical seems to be, at least in the 9s I've done so far, pretty navigable. So I think we got to keep focused on raising our score up bit by bloody bit. It does look like if we can get each of these up from an 8 to a 9, that'll buy us another 100 or so rating.
Increased over
that
time,
ain't nothing.
And in 2006,
that ain't
2 Hispanic
nothing.
immigrants allegedly killed a Hazleton man. The charges against the 2 were later dropped, but in the meantime, Hazleton's mayor Lou Barletta and the conservative city council got to ride the fear of crime anti-immigrant sentiment to do things like make English the official town language, whatever that means, and pass punitive laws against renters and
I'm getting
employers
instant invites
who rent
into 8s
to or
now. That's pretty
employ
sick.
illegal immigrants. Land of the free, where people are illegal. Those ordinances were eventually knocked down by the courts. More on that later. Do we have a clip of Mayor Lou Barletta in court admitting that he didn't know how many undocumented immigrants lived there, or how many committed crimes, or what goo-goo, or how gaga? We don't. We don't. But he did say that. Not the goo goo gaga part, but the other stuff. Okay, awesome. Well, I wish we had a clip, but we will be going full screen for this next quote because I really have to sneeze. And also, it really brings home a lot of what we've been talking about this episode. It's a quote from that article that Tucker either didn't read or doesn't want you to read for some reason. It involves Jamie Longacelle, who grew up in Hazleton and is now a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. So I'm going to read this quote that Tucker didn't read to you. It's a quote from 2018. Bugger. His research found repeated themes. The anecdotes were often similar. Did that many people really witness a Latino family at the grocery store using food stamps to buy seafood and steak? Or did the stories spiral forward on their own weight, embraced and repeated as personal observation? And why did so few people in his research reference the new residents who were paying taxes, going to church twice a week, buying sedans on Airport Road, and opening businesses that percolate all up and down North Wyoming Street?
We need a healer.
You hear somebody say,
they're in the park grabbing up ducks by their neck and cutting their head off and walking off with them and eating them like.
But then later on they say,
All I said was, people are in the parks getting ducks and grabbing them up by their head and cutting them off and walking off and eating them. Because this is a rumor going around the city.
Right. Despite rumors of food stamps and steak,
That's all I
or eating
said,
pets
bro.
or killing geese or whatever, and some actual conflict and growing pains in towns like Hazleton, people are people and live and contribute to society. Apparently, for JD and the GOP, there's only option one: round up millions of people and deport them. But what if, stick with me, there's option two:
Ooh.
many other options. And so we're going to look at some of those things when we come back from the break. We're going to go back to Hazleton since Tucker's last visit and see how things are going. We're going to look a little closer at Springfield's problems, and we're going to see what JD wants to do about it, if anything. What he's done, what he's doing, what he's up to, how he's feeling. Whatever makes sense.
Hi, I'm television's Cody Johnston. So visit this website now. That's simplysafe.com/more news. Because, folks, there's no safe like Simply Safe. Do you hear that, Amadeus?
Folks, we couldn't be more back. Yeah, we could. Okay, we are fully back.
A little worried this group is going to struggle to find a healer, especially with the tank offline. Not sure what to make of that, but we'll give them a little bit of time. We'll give them a minute. I gotta put away my dishes from dinner anyway.
And we were just talking about so many dang things. I mean, immigrants eating pets, Nazi stuff, bananas at one point, a whole lot of stuff. You know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of glazed here, some sprinkle stuff, some of these cinnamon rolls, just whatever makes sense.
Fascinating. Speaking of clips, here's another clip. It's from a different investigative journalist who went to Springfield in order to get quotes of people complaining about immigrants.
I'm currently in the process of reapplying for food stamps, but again, even that for us is a fight because of these Haitians. We can't get these simple things because they're coming and they're taking it.
I bet they're even buying steak with those food stamps. Now,
Is that
J.D.
what's
Vance
happening?
would like you to believe that he is concerned about real problems facing his non-Haitian constituents. To him, a lot of those problems are and stem from the non-constituent Haitians and immigration generally. But despite the fact that, legally speaking, they're legal immigrants, he views them as illegal immigrants, ruining these other people's lives and draining their resources.
Less illegal and more illegitimate immigrants in his fucked up perspective.
And he's cool with having used unfounded and obviously bogus rumors that all turned out to be wrong in order to demonize a whole ethnic group, leading to harassment and bomb threats in the town. And he doesn't care if any of it's true or not, as long as we can talk about how this lady can't get her fucking food stamps. I'm sure JD loves food stamps. But before we get to whether or not JD Vance loves food stamps, let's return to Hazleton and get this over with. Immigration is generally good for the economy and the country. It just is. It doesn't bring more crime. Natural-born citizens commit more crime than immigrants. Immigration benefits American taxpayers. Even that libs of TikTok Republican state senator pointed this out in her reply about how they helped improve things. And so it might not surprise you that many mid-sized, small, and rural towns have been trying to attract immigrants in order to boost their economies over the last decade or so. This idea that immigration makes areas poorer and overwhelms them with burden may feel correct in the short term, but that's just not how it plays out. Take, for example, Hazleton, Pennsylvania. At one point, it was one of those coal mining boom towns that peaked around World War II and then slowly declined as their industry and population shrank. In 2000, the year, some major distributors took root in the area. This led to, as I mentioned earlier, Latino families moving from New Jersey, New York, and other areas, leading to a rapidly growing Latino population, leading to rapidly growing racism and xenophobia, as we also discussed earlier. But despite that, piss Mayor Barletta's efforts to demonize immigrants and the Latino population, they kept moving there. And although you may
Fantastic.
not see a
Full group achieved.
follow-up on that town
Standing
that does
by
not
the
care
stone.
about, things in Hazleton
The healer
have
is my
actually
guilty.
rebounded. And despite what he and his national conservative movement might
Probably not
want to
gonna get
believe,
score from this.
it didn't rebound because
But
of
we
mass
will get
deportation of
crests.
immigrants, but rather because of those immigrants. Hazleton recently came out of distressed status after getting help from the state and following various recommendations regarding policy and basic balancing of the budget, a process that the city had not gone through, according to one city council member, in forever. No mass deportations necessary. Sorry to the xenophobes out there. You're welcome to the xenomorphs, though. They know why. Anyway, it wasn't easy, but it was done. And Hazleton is still apparently going through an economic boom. And you know what probably actually didn't help the town? All the demonizing of immigrants.
Yeah,
Because
all the racism.
remember earlier talking about those ordinances that piss Mayor Barletta tried to push through, but they were all challenged and struck down by the courts? Do we have a clip? Those ordinances were eventually knocked down by the courts. More on that later. So later is now, and we do have more on that. Specifically, 1.4 million more, which is the number of dollars spent on the lawyers who
We
fought
don't summon
the town
people
on
anymore,
account
we
of
just
their
fly
racist
down.
and
I'm fine with that.
unconstitutional laws. The
I'm
less
fine with
pissed
that.
mayor who succeeded Barletta, Joseph Yanuzzi, has pointed out that the city had a budget of $9 million. And so to pay that court-ordered $1.4
Let's all
million,
fly down.
they had to take out a bank loan. As Yanuzzi also pointed out, with that money, we could have hired 12 police officers, or like something other than cops, but you get the point. This, of course, all started in the early aughts. Thanks to Hazleton, but not only Hazleton, we know how this story can go, despite the fear-mongering. So what of Springfield, Ohio? Well, Springfield is not dissimilar from Hazleton. Though not a big coal mining town, it used to be a bustling manufacturing hub that made quite a lot of the nation's agricultural machinery. In the late 60s and 70s, the population was about 80,000, but over the years, factories closed and jobs were shipped overseas. And by 2015, the population had shrunk to about 60,000. But much like in Hazleton, city leaders eventually put together a plan in 2014 to bring in new jobs and business. Over the next several years, they would attract a Japanese auto parts manufacturer, food service firms, logistics companies, a microchip maker, and others. With the estimated 8,000 new jobs came, well, 8,000 job openings. Unfortunately, a lot of potential employees and younger folks were, as Vance allegedly wrote about in some terrible book of his, dealing with addiction. And so other people moved there. You probably know to whom I am referring. Yes, Haitians. Not only Haitians, but as we mentioned earlier, people moved there because they heard there were jobs. Because there were. And those jobs weren't being filled. So they moved
Because when we get charged rent to live on this planet, we all need jobs, even the people you don't like.
there to start families and have jobs. And this isn't all to say that there are no problems. It's a lot more people, so some services are feeling the strain. It's more people in hospitals and schools and getting assistance, and many who need translators. Rents, like they are in cities throughout the state and country, so no Haitian migrants necessary, are rising. Even before the surge of Haitians, Springfield's poverty rate was about twice the national average, adding a lot more people to a place.
We got the rare ungilded Mythic Plus enjoyers. We got the rare no guild havers in the year of our Lord 2024. That's crazy.
Place can create problems or issues, but not insurmountable ones. Not ones that necessitate you banning people from coming there or kicking out thousands of people who are there. Many of the jobs were also not being filled because of much of the population aging out of that work. So what about simply improving your services? You actually have more money now because of all the people that moved there. This is another important aspect of this. These immigrants aren't doing nothing. They're working jobs. They're starting businesses. They're spending money. They're buying things. All of that contributes to the tax base and to services. People seem to have this weird idea that 20,000 people move to Springfield and all they do is use your services and eat cats. That's it. They don't work or participate in the community or society at large. It's extremely weird. They're taking our jobs and they're lazy leeches. But no, they are on average working and helping. For example, Medicaid is about 5% of Ohio's overall economy. It pays for the health care of 1 in 4 Ohioans, many who, again, are getting older and rely on programs like Medicare and Social Security. Well, if population growth in Ohio is stagnant and the residents are older, then there are more people who need those services, but fewer people who can contribute to and provide those services.
Fucking
They're not taking your food stamps, they're working and thus contributing to the program. These Haitian migrants are working jobs and paying income tax and sales tax, etc. They're not just there. So in response to the strain of this sudden rise in population, it's okay to be like, hey, we're struggling a little. Do we have a little money? Help us out? And indeed, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine is earmarking an additional $2.5 million to help with Springfield's health department.
That could be the end for me.
They'd already spent some on things like
No
driver
patrol my
education and
Disney
language
Guild.
interpretation.
That'll
Call
happen.
me Cody, but it seems like spending $2.5 million on helping expand and strengthen their healthcare system is a better use of money than, say, $1.9 million to pay for your racist laws that don't stay on the books.
It was a bit of an
Or,
aggressive
I guess,
poll, but nothing
we could
wrong
just
with it.
Deport everybody, which would cost nothing. Now, ignoring the psychological cost and trauma of a nation seeing the mass deportation of millions of people, the inevitable violence, the separation of families and friends, etc., I think that's an often ignored aspect of this to highlight. But ignoring that cost, how much money would that cost? According to multiple sources of varying ideological leanings, the number ranges from $10,070 to $23,684 per person to deport. Since this is a conservative issue, let's be conservative about it, and we won't even include the additional facilities we'll definitely have to build for the more than 10 million people.
Yeah, the additional facilities where we'll have to concentrate the people that we're attempting to mass deport. You know, those facilities might be some kind of lodging or some kind of camp. But, you know, if we're going to move ahead with mass deportation, there's going to have to be some kind of place where we can concentrate those people.
And so let's say it costs just $10,000 to deport an immigrant. Reminder that these Haitians are legal immigrants, by the way. And we're not even going to deport 20,000 Haitians, but the more accurate and lower number, 15,000. That is $150 million. Folks, $150 million because a white guy killed a goose? Or instead, we could, stop me if you've heard this before, let them be here. Because of all the reasons.
Yeah.
In Columbus, Ohio, 30 minutes away from Springfield, a study on their metro area found that immigrant households contributed $712.4 million to state and local taxes in 2019. That's almost 5 whole mass deportations of Springfield. A federal study also found that refugees and asylees, again, legal immigrants, contribute on average more to the economy than they take away from it. Elon Musk might want to be stupid or lying
that's
about how low
unfortunate.
birth rates and increased immigration caused the fall of the Roman Empire, but increased
that guy to
immigration
die to
actually
that?
led to its peak. Yes, there can be
That's
tension,
unfortunate.
but it smooths out over time and things improve. And I guess we have 2 questions now. One, does J.D. Vance know any of this? He presents himself as a guy who can read, so one assumes that he does.
That hurt.
But his actions, for example, hitching his wagon to America's Hitler, his words, say otherwise. But before we answer that question, we have another one. What
That
the
was a lot
fuck
of
has
damage.
J.D. Vance done for these people? That woman in the video complaining about Haitians taking her food stamps? Bad news to her. J.D. Vance and the Republican
unfortunate.
Party don't want food stamps to exist. Like, it's pretty frustrating to see people complain about not getting welfare or public services because of immigrants while
I mean,
supporting the political
it's strictly
party that wants to
fine,
abolish
but
those programs and services.
it
That
bodes
consistently
poorly
demonize
for the future
people
bosses.
who use it, especially the non-white people. As Rolling Stone describes in his book I'll never read, Vance writes about folks at the grocery store trying to game the welfare system and recalls that he formed deep class resentments toward those living off government largesse, complaining about, for example, our drug addict neighbor would buy T-bone steaks, which I was too poor to buy for myself, but was forced by Uncle Sam to buy for someone else. They're those damn food stamp steaks again. In old blog posts, Vance also lamented that Medicare and Social Security are the biggest roadblocks to any kind of real fiscal sanity. So, I don't know, it doesn't sound like he gives a shit about your fucking food stamps, lady. Not that he doesn't pretend to. Here he is, claiming victory for securing money for his constituents.
We've done a lot of good work for our constituents. We've got hundreds of millions of dollars to the Great Lakes.
Eagle-brained viewers might already know that that money came from President Biden's infrastructure bill. A bill that, stop me if you've heard this one before, J.D. Vance voted against. Because there are things that can be done to help people. Sorry it costs money or whatever, but so does everything. And there are compassionate, sensible, and helpful things that can be done about the tension and strain in a town like Springfield or Hazleton. But no, the only government solution is mass deportation. Anything else is communism that you take credit for but vote against. Even before all of these cat rumors, the city officials in Springfield were just like, yeah, we need a little help. Some money to help us through the transition. If you could help us out, that'd be great. We know it'll help and then get better. And that's a fine solution, right? Unless you're, stop me if you've heard this before,
that's scary.
a Nazi. Is really the
Yeah,
point
I'm
I'm
gonna
getting
get
at.
in his link.
Much like a
I'm gonna
snake
get in
that
his
a
link.
dumb hick like J.D. Vance would probably eat, he's spitting in the face of decency and truth in order to serve his fascist lie so we can do mass deportations now, despite what is sometimes even said to his face. At the beginning of this episode, we briefly mentioned that J.D. Vance, before all this cat-eating stuff, did bring up the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio once. He was doing this at a hearing that we will watch. He even shared his own clip of it.
Chairman Brown, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to submit a letter for the record from the city of Springfield and our state, the southwestern part of our state, which I think highlights a very real example of this particular
the ticks
concern.
are hurting me.
Straight from the horse's
The
mouth
ticks.
itself. Now, this letter, I want to quote from it. Springfield has seen a surge in population through immigration that has significantly impacted our ability as a community to produce enough housing opportunities for all. Springfield's Haitian population has increased 15 to 20,000 over the last 4 years in a community of under 60,000 previous
At least I
residents,
finally have some
putting a
defenses.
significant strain on our resources and ability to provide ample housing for all of our residents. And end quote there. And,
I
and
can
my,
live this.
No objection.
Yeah.
Thank you. In my conversations with folks in Springfield, it's not
We're
just
good.
housing. They're trying to build
We're
5,000 new housing units, which is a very Herculean task in a town of about 55,000 people. But it's also hospital services, it's school services, there are a whole host of ways in which this immigration problem, I think, is having very real
a whole hoary
human
host.
consequences.
Our any-eyed viewers might notice that it's just him speaking. What's this interaction? What was said before he spoke? Well, let's go to the original video and show you what was said to
No, don't do that, Cody. You'll make him look stupid. That's
J.D.
mean.
Vance just seconds before that moment.
What do you see as the relationship, in particular, given that housing is such a big driver of the inflation that we've seen over the last few years? As Senator Haggerty said, the highest in 40 years. What role do you see illegal immigration playing in driving up housing costs, which of course is a main driver of inflation for American citizens?
Let me quickly start by echoing your first comment, which is we don't comment on immigration policy, but we do comment on inflation. So I would say this. Many people came into the country over the last couple of years, many of them through asylum requests, and went to work. Labor supply increased a great deal. It's not. There's no clear answer, but my sense is that in the long run, immigration is kind of neutral on inflation. In the short run, it may actually have helped because the labor market got looser because there were more people. But you're talking about housing specifically. There will be, I'm sure there are places in the country where new people coming into the country. I'm sure you can find places, and they exist, where that will have contributed to an already tight housing market. But overall, in terms of aggregate inflation, I wouldn't say it's a driver one way or the other.
To his face. He was told to his face. Well, actually, immigration helped the economy and kept inflation from going up more than it would have. And generally, over time, these issues smooth out. Generously,
Can't have
Chairman
that,
of the
though.
Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said it was neutral. To his face. And then he's like, how are you going to build 5,000 homes? That's a lot of homes to build. And now, with these 20,000 more people, what are we to do? First of all, JD, we're the United Goddamn States of f***ing America. We can build 5,000 homes, you pathetic little naysaying, unpatriotic worm. Second of all, it's actually more like 12 to 15,000 people. But third of all, you were just told that immigrants fill job positions and work hard. He's framing it like 20,000 people showed up and are just kind of like sitting around. Who do you think's going to be building those homes? Most likely, the people being called sand monkeys, not the people saying sand monkeys.
Yeah.
JD goes on to ask how an influx of workers helps a tight labor market. Is told how. Then he asks why
Love
you
me
have
as
to bring in
Andalari
immigrants
Troll
and can't just
Paladin.
raise wages
One of
to
the
attract
best,
new,
one of the best in the
American workers.
game.
And because that sounds like a weird question, specifically for JD to ask, here it is.
You know, you see a labor shortage. Rather than bringing in a large number of new immigrants, why not try to boost wages in a way that brings some of those workers off the sidelines? That seems to be a much better focus from my perspective.
Certainly, that's a very constructive focus. I would agree. It's not. I don't think it has to be one or the other.
What? JD.
Whoops.
What?
Whoops.
Why not just raise wages? Sure, man. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Are
go
you
ahead
gonna
and
do
raise
that?
wages then, motherfucker.
Organizations like the Economic Policy Institute have pretty clear recommendations to help raise wages or force a tight labor market in order to raise wages, etc. Those suggestions are things like jobs programs, raising the minimum wage, strengthening unions and the right to collectively bargain, ending forced arbitration, regularizing
That shit
undocumented
sounds pretty
workers,
cool.
or securing
Yeah, let's
more
do that
sick
stuff,
leave and
man.
paid family leave. or
No,
going
my
after wage
orb.
theft. Do you
No.
want to do any of that? Or are you maybe more in line with the party, your party, that wants to do things that places like EPI recommend not to do in order to raise wages, like lowering taxes on individuals and corporations?
My motherfucking
austerity,
orb
and
went through the
deregulation?
wall,
hey,
bro.
JD, you want to be the president? Why not just raise wages?
Yeah.
You fucking dumb commie asshole. Anyway, here's some more news. What a piece of shit that guy is. You suck, JD. You're America's Hitler's pet. Congratulations. Go to hell. Poop in your own mouth and swallow.
Nice.
Okay. Bye, folks.
What is this outro song?
This just in. There's more. When you're done swallowing that poop you pooped, poop that out and swallow that.
Nice.
Dip. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and boy, I really gotta start saying that at the beginning of the video. And leave a comment, that'd be nice. We've got a patreon.com/somemore-news. We've got a podcast called Even More News. You can listen to it podcast-wise, or you can watch it video podcast-wise on this channel, which you should subscribe to it, please, and like it. The video too. You can also listen to Some More News, which you just watched, as a podcast if you prefer to not look at my stupid face. And we've got merch at a merch store. That link is on the screen, and examples of the merch, hopefully, are also on the screen. And you know what else? Oh, breaking news again. Oh my god. He did it. He pooped and then he ate it, and then he pooped that out and he ate it. All right, JD! That's my president!
Interrupt 1. Watch way.
This boss is so ridiculous.
Interrupt 2. Watch your step. Watch all. Run to edge of room.
Run to edge of room.
Watch all. Watch your step. Interrupt 2.
Uh-oh. That hurt me a little bit there. That hurt me a little bit.
Watch way.
And that was scary. Big boss.
Interrupt 1.
Bro says focus big. You know, in every group I've been in, they focus the little boss, but whatever, dude. It's your key. I'm not here to spit on your cupcake and call that frosting, you know? Oh. That's scary. Well, that worked out. They got a little scary there. Bro has no release. We're still making decent time, though. We're still making decent time.
So you might have heard of Chernobyl, or the BP oil spill, or even Exxon.
Also, in just the one day since this video has come out, Boy Boy's community has raised $200,000 for Steven Donziger and his defense. I do know a little bit about this guy. I've read other articles where he was featured. But as a fan of Boy Boy, I'm really glad that they're lending their bump to this guy, who is perhaps the only heroic lawyer alive today.
On Valdez. What if I told you that there's an even worse natural catastrophe in the Amazon that no one knows about? The craziest part is it was done on purpose, right? And the company that did this can destroy entire communities whenever it wants. It can like lock up anyone who gets in their way, and best of all, they don't have to pay.
Well, this is a YouTube video, right? What the hell?
Now we're talking about Chevron, and their headquarters are right behind this wall, right? Now you might think we're here to cause a scene and be really annoying. But there's one thing you should know about us, is that we love power and we love oil. So we're here to get a job.
Nice.
Do we just go out with the lipstick? Just oil.
Chevron wasn't making this easy. You know, we're just here to get a job, and we quickly realized no one wanted to help.
Damn, Alex looking kind of cut. Like, Alexa still looks good, but Alex? Holy shit, Alex, you got like 5% body fat, brother.
They just kept sending us back and forth.
Would you ever give them my resume? They come down.
Actually, they're going to take it. I'm not taking it.
You don't want to take it?
Well, mine, it's a little bit less.
It turns out we might have been in the wrong building, but security gave us a pass to go upstairs just to be sure. We don't want to miss out on this job.
They're not here. They're not here. They're not here. They must have moved out 3 years ago.
Oh no. They got all
There were just
oiled
a
up
bunch
for
of empty
nothing,
offices
bro.
where Chevron used to be, so we decided to leave and give up
I
on our
hate when
dreams
that
of working
happens.
for a big oil company.
I think we got the wrong building.
Our big oily dreams were completely shattered, but out of nowhere, a friendly security guard told us where to go.
So, this happened during the building for about 3
Yeah, I know. It's like that. You don't know. Oh, thank you.
Oh, so there is filming.
Finding a job isn't easy, you know? Sometimes you make
Yeah.
mistakes.
You know what they say, the key to any new job is persistence, so we showed up at the new headquarters.
I just want to get a job with the oil company.
Yeah, we've got our resumes here. As you can see, we're very oily men.
Wait,
We're very oily men.
There's a security risk here.
Oh, it's dangerous in there.
No, it's just a security risk here. You can't get access to the
Okay, even if we're this oily?
Yes.
Especially if you're that oily, Alexa.
Can you guys give our resumes to someone?
Yeah,
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So we can't get a job here? Cool.
So we've had some kind of misunderstanding. Chevron doesn't want to hire us today.
That was a weird little lag spike
we're
there.
also not
Thankfully,
allowed within
we're
100
fine.
meters of Chevron or any of its subsidiaries, which is a bit of an overreaction. Look, I'm not an idiot. Like, I know this looks bad. I understand how it looks, but Chevron, if you're listening, I'm not some kind of like creepy, unhinged stalker that's making videos about you on the internet. No, I'm a normal guy. I'm just a regular, well-adjusted
Just
person.
a regular, everyday, normal guy.
We just need to, if you let me explain it from the start, you'll understand. So if we go to the beginning, which is, it actually all started pretty much around...
I'm a little worried, if I'm honest. I'm a little worried right now.
In 1541, when Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana first set sail down the Amazon River in Ecuador looking for El Dorado, the mythical city of gold. Now, spoiler alert, he did not find a city.
What? You mean that animated movie / documentary was a lie? That's not fair.
Made of gold, but he did find a lot of rocks made of gold, and silver, and iron, and copper, and slaves, and fruit, and coffee, and slaves. All the Europeans had to do was kill 56 million.
All that human capital just lying around, not being used. Kinda crazy.
People, and before you know it, everyone got in line. South America became a never-ending conveyor belt, kind of like this belt grinder here. It just keeps going in circles, loading up stuff on this end and emptying it all in Europe on this end. And that's me. I'm Europe in this analogy. Now, the real-life conveyor belt is even better than this because, you know, unlike a belt grinder, it doesn't...
It turns out that Alexa actually chipped his tooth doing that stunt, by the way, which is fucking crazy. It's a little bit too much commitment to the bit, but that's boy for you.
Hurt your face when you use it. It pretty much just gives you free stuff for like the next 500 years and counting. Like eventually Chevron will make really good use of this conveyor belt to like suck all the oil out of South America and, you know, make one of the worst environmental catastrophes we've ever seen, but that's for later in the story. For the first couple of centuries, it was primarily used for gold and a couple of other weird things like cigarettes and purple shirts. I don't know, Europeans love that stuff for some reason, but my point is it's a solid conveyor belt. Even when the South Americans eventually kicked out the Western powers and started ruling themselves, the conveyor belt stayed intact. Over the next 100 years, every now and then they would elect someone who wanted to keep all these profits in South America. But the CIA would just organize a military coup and replace them with a more business-friendly leader. i.e., someone who would make sure Western companies got all the profits.
Scamps.
Ecuador is a great example. I mean, look at Jose Maria Velasco Ibarra.
Yeah,
I mean,
the guy said
you don't
boss,
have to look
as
at it.
in tunnel boss.
What you need to know is that
I'm gonna
he got the
tunnel
most
boss,
votes
don't you
anyone's ever
worry.
gotten in Ecuador. He was voted in as president 5 times, but the only problem is he never got to complete a full term in power because every time he got voted in, he'd immediately be kicked out by a military coup and replaced with a pro-U.
Oh, we're a little tight on the timer here. We're a little tight on the timer. Especially because this last hallway, this hallway's the hard hallway. This hallway's the one that'll fuck you up.
West leader.
So
My man started getting used to it, but the final time he got voted in and then immediately kicked out was extra special, since it coincided with the discovery of huge amounts of oil in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Now, Jose wanted to nationalize the oil and have the profits returned to Ecuador instead of going to giant Western oil companies like Chevron. So, obviously, the military did a coup and removed him from power. Now, at the time of the coup, all television stations went off the air. 6 million Ecuadorians had no idea that a military takeover was happening, but somehow an American company called Texaco knew exactly what was going on, and funnily enough, the military government's first order of business was to grant Texaco full rights to
wow, that's
Ecuador's oil,
crazy.
which is a crazy coincidence. But what's even more of a coincidence is that every time a new leader took the reins of this newly formed Ecuadorian military dictatorship, he'd have to assure Washington that he had no plans to nationalize the oil industry if he wanted to stay in power.
wait, that's weird. I thought Ecuador's a different country.
Now, with Ecuador's pesky democracy out of the way, Texaco went to town on the Amazon, digging up all of Ecuador's resources for free and keeping all the profits for themselves. Now, over time, the very hungry oil company drank up so much free oil and just grew and grew and grew that eventually Texaco merged with Chevron, which made two very big oil companies
What a beautiful
become
story.
one of the biggest companies in the world. But the fun ended in 1992. The Ecuadorians finally managed to nationalize their oil and they drove the oil giant out of the country. But this is where the horror show really started. I mean, the Ecuadorians finally got full control of the oil fields and they got a glimpse of what this company's been doing in the Amazon for the past 20 years. There were always rumors of what was going on deep in the rainforest. While the company was in charge, local tribes occasionally complained that their water tasted different. But the oil company brushed them aside and said, don't worry about the taste of the water, drink it up. We've done you a favor and filled it with special vitamins that are good for you, actually. And it turns out they did exactly what you'd expect a giant corporation to do in a third world country where they had complete control over the government.
They didn't lie, did they?
Decided to dump 72 billion liters of toxic waste into the pristine rainforest
That
rivers.
doesn't sound like any company I've
cheaper than
heard
disposing of it
of.
properly. They wiped out multiple local communities. They poisoned and scarred their bodies and destroyed all their food and water, causing what experts have called the Amazon Chernobyl.
Oh, we're pulling everything in here? Okay, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we're all about to die, actually.
So, yeah, it turns out their oil company didn't put vitamins in the water, which is very sneaky. But we decided to talk to Steven Donziger about it. He's a lawyer who fought for the people of Ecuador. Chevron actually ended up throwing him in prison, which makes him the only American citizen in history to be locked up by a private corporation. But we'll get into that later.
I don't think pulling this whole room was the call, even on
what he saw in the Amazon in the 90s.
Even on Tyrannical.
Now, the only problem is he lives all the way over here in New York, so we decided to meet in the middle, in sunny Kiribati. But it turns out Chevron won't let him leave the country, so we decided to meet in sunny LA. At a beautiful, pristine park in the middle of the city that's also somehow home to a bunch of Chevron's oil pumps.
It's such a good shot, just an oil well. It looks like it's drilling into your head.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's really funny.
I guess we'll start from the beginning. What did you find in the Amazon? What happened down there?
You didn't find anything bad, right? You only found good stuff?
It's sort of hard to describe how bad it is in Ecuador.
Oh, no.
What they did is it's just apocalyptic. And I remember seeing a lot of bad shit. But I remember going over like a hill in the car we were in. In the distance, I saw what looked like a lake. It was sunny and it was like glistening in the sun. And as we got closer, he's like, that's not a lake. I'm like, well, what is it? He goes,
all right, we got 4 minutes to grip it and rip it.
But this was the crazy part. We get near the lake. It's hot as hell. You smell the vapors. They're awfully harmful. It's like you can't even hang out there that long. You start getting
They're
headaches.
awfully
As
harmful.
we got up to the lake,
yeah.
I saw these two indigenous men like wading with no shirts on, no protection, through the lake with like mops. And they were like shoveling the oil into bags. And then like coming out the side, they had oil over them and putting the bags like on the ground. And then going back in the lake and wading and doing the same thing. Like Texaco deliberately created this system. This was not an oil spill. This was not an accident. This was an engineered design to dump systematically literally millions of gallons of toxic waste into a pristine, beautiful ecosystem that indigenous peoples relied on for their sustenance. Had relied on for thousands of years. In a few short years, they poisoned the whole thing.
They ruined
since
it.
the land can't support them anymore, they're left to take jobs, like pay nothing, virtually nothing, to sit there and do this
It's the American
futile
dream, brother.
exercise of mopping up an oil lake with your bare damn hands.
Well, there's a pipe that's still...
Yeah, exactly.
Feeding it in.
It was at this point that Stephen remembered that he was, in fact, a lawyer, which means he
right.
can represent these indigenous Ecuadorians who had never set foot in a courtroom before.
Hell yeah.
Van a estar ahí, sentado arriba, con sus trajes, sus corbatas. No tengan miedo. Se levanten, se va al micrófono y hablan.
Now, the initial problem was that this oil company was in control of the Ecuadorian government for decades. So they got the government to sign something called the Act of Liberation, which made it illegal for anyone from Ecuador to sue them. Which
Hell yeah.
I didn't know was
I
possible.
love liberty,
on
dude.
that note, Chevron, if you're watching, by watching this, you legally forfeit your right to sue us. Okay.
That's how legal stuff works.
So the cards were
Oh
stacked
my
against
God.
the Ecuadorians, but nonetheless, Stephen started their 30-year fight with Chevron. Now, he may have had 54 independent judicial site inspections resulting in 64,000 chemical sampling results showing pollution, but you could say Chevron had a bit of an ace up its sleeves.
Is it money?
The case was $262 billion.
Ooh, that is a lot of money.
So in order to silence the indigenous Ecuadorians, they hired 60 law firms and 2,000 lawyers, which, in case you didn't know, is this many people. Which means Chevron ended up spending over $3 billion in this case. Now, when a company like Chevron puts 2,000 of the world's most expensive lawyers in the same room, you end up getting bombarded with mountains and mountains of useless page is specifically designed to clog up whatever court has to read them. Every single page needs an answer.
Hell
and it costs
yeah.
your legal team thousands of dollars to answer them. Their aim is to simply outspend you until you have no choice but to drop the case. Now, Stephen wasn't only running out of money. The 30,000 Ecuadorians that he was representing were all dying of toxic contamination. So if they stalled for long enough, Stephen wouldn't have any clients left. Now, Stephen's team was trying to sue them in front of a jury in the US, and Chevron sure as hell didn't want that. So after 10 years of stalling, Chevron eventually won and got to choose to do the prosecution back in Ecuador, a tiny country with no real power to enforce any rulings. And then the next 8-year battle began. Now, Chevron didn't just stall and outspend Stephen, they got even sneakier. They went so far as to set up fake laboratories. They would pose as independent labs who studied soil samples and coincidentally concluded that there was actually no pollution in the Amazon. But it turns out they belonged to Chevron, and thanks to a group of brave whistleblowers, the truth got out. Now, we've covered Australian whistleblowers a lot on our channel, and a lot of our friends have been sued and imprisoned for doing the right thing. But these guys are on a whole new level. Like, when you get in the way of Chevron in a third world country, you usually get tortured and murdered. Like one of the main indigenous representatives for this Chevron case, Pablo Fajardo, he was receiving death threats as soon as he joined the legal team, and as a warning, his brother was tortured and killed, and the government refused to investigate it.
Great. Oh my God.
Mi hermano murió 8 días antes de que realicemos la primera inspección judicial del caso Texaco.
Le habían torturado fuertemente, cortado su...
Like, this is what happens when a corporation becomes bigger and more powerful than any one country. More powerful even than the USA. It becomes something else entirely. It becomes a corrupting force on this planet.
Rostro. No tenía nada en la cabeza, no se le conocía, no se le identificaba.
Alguna vez un informe militar le dijeron a uno de mis hermanos que a quien buscaban era a mí.
But in the face of all this brutality and corruption, the people of Ecuador just kept fighting, and they won. Like, it's insane. Chevron was ordered to pay $9.5 billion to the people of Ecuador. Like, David beat Goliath. This had never happened before. It was a landmark ruling, like one of the biggest cases in world history.
I do like how my best run on the Dawnbreaker was that 9 that I did tonight, whereas most of these are like best run level 3, level 2, level 5, level 2, level 2, level 4. But my best ever Dawnbreaker was tonight's Dawnbreaker.
And somehow the indigenous Ecuadorians beat one of the world's biggest corporations. But it was time for the next ace up Chevron's sleeve.
No, let's get that question in, by the way.
Also money.
Yeah, more fucking money, dude.
They lobbied the US government to sanction Ecuador. They pulled all of their assets out of the country before the court could seize them, knowing that they were so rich and powerful that no other country would dare enforce Ecuador's ruling.
Their top
hey, look at
lawyer
that.
famously said in 2009 that we will never pay a penny of this judgment. We will fight this until hell freezes over, and then we will fight it out on the island.
Well, that's interesting. That's actually a pretty good item to get from that. It's not a Queen Ansorek item. I was hoping for Ansorek's ring or possibly the trinket there. That would have been preferred. But I believe that cloak is actually my Bis cloak from the raid. It is. And even though my current cloak is strictly better... Is it strictly better? I mean, it's got the avoidance on there. Let's look at how this moves my stat mixture around. Doesn't really move my stat mixture around at all. So it becomes a matter of, is the avoidance better than this effect? Taking damage greater than 25% of your health grants you a shit ton of avoidance and increases healing taken by 10%. You know, I do feel like that's probably better. Even if it does cost me some avoidance in the trade. Like, what is 2% avoidance better than a boatload of avoidance? Also saves me the crest to have to upgrade it. Also saves me the crest.
Nice.
I mean, look, considering that they're polluting the planet, maybe, hell will freeze over pretty soon.
Yeah, that might come sooner than we think.
I say
So
we
now,
go for
after
it.
18
I say we
years
run
of
it.
fighting, Stephen's team has to chase Chevron around the world, trying to find a country that would enforce this judgment and finally make Chevron pay for purposely destroying these people's lives. In the meantime, the Amazon still looks like this. This giant Western company drenched it in toxic waste, and the few bits of the Amazon that are still pristine are now reserved for rich Westerners who just shit and vomit all over the rainforest floor while trying to find themselves on an ayahuasca trip. But if you think that's bad, things are about to get much, much worse for the Ecuadorians.
Oh,
Chevron
great.
knew full well that if they ended up paying this judgment, they'd set a precedent, right? Their whole business model, like the way they make
Not
insane
a
profits is by just
precedent.
like going into a country, sucking up all their resources for as cheap as possible, and then just dumping the waste wherever they want. And then they leave the local communities to pay the price, right? If Chevron pays $9.5 billion to the Ecuadorians, soon every single community they've destroyed around the world will start asking for money. So they decided to make an example out of Stephen to, scare other lawyers from doing what he's done. So they took him to court in the US and claimed that he had bribed an Ecuadorian judge personally to rule against Chevron. And to prove that, they got this guy called Alberto to kind of stand up in front of the court and just, say that that's what Stephen did. Now, here's the
Nice.
catch. Alberto said that during Stephen's case, and then 3 years later, he admitted under oath to an international tribunal that Chevron paid him more than $1 million to lie about Stephen,
Oh,
which
whoops.
is insane. But the crazy part
Whoops.
isn't the $1 million lie. It's the fact that it took 50 days to coach this man on how to present fake testimony, which... I know there are so many wild parts of this case, but 50 days. Like, paying the world's most expensive lawyers for 50 days just to teach this guy how to recite a lie. I mean, is he an idiot? Like, how does it take him 50 days to learn how to lie? Like, I swear it should take a day. Like, in fact, I've hired an Ecuadorian man to prove how easy it is. And to replicate the stress of a courtroom, I've also taken his clothes off.
Esteban gave me lots of money. He is very, very bad man. Also, Chevron is very good company.
Hooray!
Diego, eres muy talentoso. No jodas, solo 15 minutos. Diego, venga. Eres muy talentoso. Bravo, Diego. Bravo.
But anyway, Alberto told his $1 million lie and tricked a jury into ruling against Stephen. Well, actually, no, it wasn't a jury. It was all decided by this one guy, Judge Louis A. Kaplan, who's coincidentally funded by Chevron, but that's for later in the story. For now, Alberto is kicking back in California, receiving a lifetime salary from Chevron, and Stephen found himself in a whole lot of legal trouble. He got his law license revoked. Like, they froze his bank accounts and they took
That
his
fall down
apartment. Like, they
reduction
literally
seems to
took
actually
the
be pretty
clothes off
useful.
his back and probably like the pants off his legs. Also, maybe his underpants off his penis or something. and so Chevron wasn't done. So they got old mate Judge Louis A. Kaplan to take another crack at him. And just on a side note, why does he look like that? Like, why does every single ghoul who sells their soul to a big corporation end up looking like this? What's going on? Like, I don't understand. Is this what happens when you make a deal with the devil? It's fucking tedious. Anyway, so
That's
Judge
what
A.
you
Kaplan,
get.
Big Louis, he wants to confiscate Stephen's laptop and phone. Which Stephen obviously appealed because of, lawyer-client confidentiality, but also ethically. The last thing you want is to give Chevron a list of every single Ecuadorian who stood up to them and exactly what they said. So while Stephen was appealing it, the judge went to the US government and said, look.
Well, that was great. We've timed a couple of keys now, and I did have an incredible banger workout today, so I want to have a little treat. So I'm going to let the boys talk a little bit while I go grab a treat.
This guy's disobeying court orders. You need to prosecute him for contempt of court. And the US government, to their credit, were like, no way. Like, we're not getting our hands dirty with Chevron's corrupt case. Just leave us out of it, right? And, in most countries, this would be the end of the story, right? If the government doesn't want to prosecute you, then you're free. But this wasn't a normal country. The judge actually managed to run a private criminal prosecution for the first time in US history. This is where a private company can take over the government's job and decide who goes to jail themselves. So essentially, if you're rich enough to pay for a courtroom, for all intents and purposes, you're the government now. And you don't even need to have a jury. The judge you hire gets to decide. Now, it's bad enough to have a private company sending someone to jail, But what's worse is that everyone who's meant to be independent is actually on Chevron's payroll. The original judge who decided this was a Chevron investor, and the law firm he had handpicked for the private prosecution, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, was paid $3 million from Chevron just before they started prosecuting Stephen. And there's even more law firms linked to this. Like, it's insane how these law firms are so good at breaking the law. Like, I think it's just like when you have a business that is just a bunch of last names in a row, people take you more seriously. Like, it's easier to get away with stuff. I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot of info out there on like exactly how Chevron funded these companies. But if you think that's exciting, then you're a nerd. You know, most people don't want to hear about that. But if you're interested, it's all in the video description. But in short, the government gave prosecutorial power to a private company, Chevron, which now can decide who they want to put in jail. And they can use that against Stephen. And while they're deciding on this, Stephen's, you know, locked in his house with no money.
He put an ankle bracelet on me. And I couldn't leave my apartment. You know, couldn't go to dinner, couldn't hang with my son, couldn't go to games. And I remember a good friend of mine came over. I'd been on house arrest for a month. She's like, when you reach 100 days, we should do like a press release. She tells me this. I'm thinking to myself, are you fucking crazy? This isn't gonna last 100 days. 100 days came, she was right, she knew something. 200 days came.
And being under house arrest for, was like 1,000 days, how long were you?
993 days. So
just under 1,000. That's lenient, that's nice.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
Now look, I'm not a lawyer, but I have done a lot of crimes, and to me, this sounds like a crime, right? Like locking someone up for 993 days, you know,